Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
After years of renting small apartments with thin walls, I saved enough for a down payment on a house. It was a small two-bedroom place on the outskirts of town. The house needed paint and had old fixtures, but it was mine. It came with a backyard which was perfect for my German Shepherd mix, Rex. Rex had been stuck in my old studio apartment for 2 years. I felt bad watching him pace around that tiny space. The poor guy barely had room to stretch his legs. Getting this house meant freedom for both of us. He could finally be a proper dog, and I could stop feeling guilty. The first week after moving in, I researched fencing options. I wanted something tall enough that Rex couldn't jump over it and sturdy enough to last through storms. I also wanted privacy so he wouldn't get distracted by every squirrel that passed by. After comparing prices, I picked a 6-foot wooden privacy fence. It wasn't cheap, but Rex's happiness was worth it. I hired a local contractor and we reviewed the property survey I had done during the home buying process. Everything was marked clearly. We installed that fence exactly on my property line, not an inch over. The project took 3 days. When it was finished, Rex was in heaven. He spent hours running back and forth, finally able to be the energetic dog he always was. That's when I met Karen. The morning after the fence was done, I was having coffee on the back porch, watching Rex explore his new space. I heard footsteps on my driveway. This woman appeared around the corner holding a ceramic mug. She was maybe in her 50s, wearing a floral bathrobe and slippers like she just got out of bed. For a second, I thought maybe she was bringing me coffee as a welcome gesture. She introduced herself and said she lived next door for 15 years. Then she wanted to talk about my fence. Something about her tone made me wary, but I tried to stay friendly. She asked if I would mind moving the fence back about 6 feet because it was blocking her view from her kitchen window. She said she liked to look out at the oak trees in the morning while she had her coffee. I stared at her for a moment. When I asked if she really meant 6 feet, she said yes, and that I'd still have plenty of yard space since I didn't need all of it. I pointed out that moving it back would mean giving her 6 feet of my property. The fence was right on the property line. She said she knew where it was, but since she had that view for 15 years, it was basically hers. I laughed. What she was suggesting was ridiculous. I told her no, I wasn't moving my fence because it was on my property and I paid for it. Her friendly act disappeared. She said I was being selfish and that she was here first. I explained that being here first didn't give her rights to my yard. She said we'd see about that and walked off, leaving me wondering what kind of person I ended up living next to. Over the next few weeks, weird things started happening. The first time I came home from work to find branches and dead leaves scattered across my back patio, right up against the fence. It was clearly from her yard. I could see matching spots where they had been raked up on her side. When I knocked on her door to ask about it, she claimed the wind must have blown them over. She acted shocked and said the wind had been really strong lately. When I pointed out that these didn't blow over and someone threw them, she said she certainly didn't do that and suggested I should check with other neighbors. The second time it happened, I found an even bigger pile, including fresh grass clippings that were still damp. Again, she played innocent when I confronted her, but last week I caught her doing something even more ridiculous. I was working in my home office, which has a window facing her backyard, when I saw movement by the fence. I looked closer and saw this woman had dragged a stepladder over to my fence and was climbing it to peek over into my yard. I walked outside and asked what she was doing. She nearly fell off the ladder. She said she was just checking to see if her cat got into my yard. I told her she didn't have a cat since I lived here 3 months and never seen one. She said it was new and she just got him. I told her to get down from there. When she climbed down, she looked annoyed with me. She said that if I weren't so selfish about moving that fence, she wouldn't have to do things like this. She just wanted to see her trees. I told her they weren't her trees, and they were on public property behind both our houses. She said that since she had been looking at them for 15 years, that made them hers. I was done being polite. I told her to stay off my fence, stop throwing her yard waste into my property, and stop trespassing. The fence stays exactly where it is. She said this wasn't over. She was right. The next morning, I woke up to find she had strung Christmas lights all along her side of the fence, positioning them so they'd shine directly into my bedroom window at night. That afternoon, she started playing music loud enough that I could hear every word through my walls. But Karen made one mistake. She didn't realize I work in tech and had installed security cameras the week after I moved in. I had clear footage of her throwing debris over the fence, climbing the ladder, and even trying to loosen some of the fence boards with a crowbar. I took all the footage to the police and filed a harassment complaint. Karen had similar complaints filed against her by two previous neighbors who had moved away. The officer who took my statement wasn't surprised. He told me they knew this address because she had done this before. Within a week, Karen got an official warning about property damage and trespassing. The music stopped. The lights came down. When I saw her in her backyard, she would quickly go inside. 2 weeks later, when I was talking to my neighbor on the other side, he mentioned that Karen had tried the same thing with the people who lived in my house before me. She demanded they trim their hedges because they blocked her view, insisted they move their garden shed, and even claimed their outdoor furniture was too close to the property line. I asked what happened to them. He explained that they got tired of her drama and sold the house. He figured she probably thought she'd try the same thing with me. But I'm not going anywhere. Rex loves his yard, I love my house, and my fence is staying exactly where it is. 2 years ago, I moved into the small apartment above my parents' garage. The rent is cheap, which helps me save money while building my client base. My parents were happy to have me close by, and I liked having my independence while still being part of the family. My younger sister still lives in the main house. She's 25 and works part-time at a local coffee shop while taking online classes for her marketing degree. We get along pretty well, though she can be dramatic sometimes. 8 months ago, she started dating this new guy. He's not terrible, but he's one of those people who treats everyone else's stuff like it's his own. The problem started a few months back when my sister came up to my apartment one evening while I was working on a logo design for a client. She asked if she could get my internet password because the signal down in her room was terrible, and she needed to submit an assignment that night. I said sure, no problem, and gave her the password without thinking much about it. She's family, right? I figured she'd just use it for her schoolwork when the main house internet was acting up. Everything was fine for about a week, then I started noticing my internet getting really slow, especially in the evenings. At first, I thought maybe my internet service provider was having issues. But when a client video call kept cutting out, I decided to check what was going on. I logged into my router's admin panel and nearly choked on my coffee. There were 7 new devices connected to my network. 7? I recognized my sister's laptop and phone, but the rest were complete mysteries. Someone was streaming Netflix. Another device was downloading what looked like massive game files, and there was even someone torrenting movies. I walked downstairs to find my sister in the kitchen making a sandwich. I asked her if we could talk because I had just checked my router and there were a bunch of random devices on my network. She told me that, oh yeah, she had given the password to her boyfriend because he needed it for one night to download something for work. I pointed out that it had been going on for more than one night and there were 7 devices connected right now. She shrugged and said, well, he probably shared it with a couple of his friends because they needed to download something quickly. When I asked if she had given my internet password to his friends, without asking me, she just said it was just internet access and I shouldn't be so dramatic about it. How casual she was being about it was unbelievable. This wasn't just about bandwidth. I work from home and need reliable internet for client calls and file uploads. Plus, I'm the one paying for this service. I told her I was changing the password because this was getting out of hand. She just said, whatever, do what I want. So I changed the password that night and kicked off all the unauthorized devices. The next morning, my sister came storming up to my apartment, demanding to know what the new password was because her boyfriend couldn't connect. I told her I wasn't giving it out anymore because too many people were using it and it was affecting my work. She asked if I was serious right now and said it was just internet. I explained that it was internet that I pay for and I needed to work properly for my job. She huffed and left. Later that evening, my parents called me down for dinner. The moment I sat down, I could feel the tension. My dad said that my sister told him I was being difficult about the internet situation. I explained that I changed my password because 7 random people were using my connection without permission. My mom asked if she wasn't my sister, and shouldn't family share things? My sister jumped in saying, "See, even they think I'm being ridiculous." I told them I was happy to share with family, but I wasn't sharing with her boyfriend's entire friend group. My sister said she couldn't control what people do with the password once she gives it to them. I asked her then maybe don't give it to them in the first place. She said that wasn't fair and I was being selfish. My dad asked if I couldn't just give her the password and trust her to be responsible. I reminded them that I already did that, and look what happened: 7 devices, constant streaming, my work calls were dropping. The conversation went in circles. My sister kept insisting it wasn't a big deal. My parents kept pushing for me to be the bigger person, and I kept explaining that this affected my ability to work. I offered a compromise. I told them I would give her the password again if she promised not to share it with anyone else, just use it for her schoolwork when she needed it. My sister refused, saying she wasn't making promises about what she does with a stupid password. So I told her then I wasn't sharing it. That was 3 weeks ago, and the Cold War is still going strong. Every family dinner is awkward. My sister makes passive-aggressive comments about how some people are selfish with technology. My parents keep dropping hints about family unity and sharing. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to do my job without my internet crashing every time someone decides to download a movie. The breaking point came last weekend during Sunday dinner. My sister's boyfriend was there, and he had the audacity to ask me directly if he could get that internet password because he just needed to update his phone really quick. I told him no, sorry, I don't share my password anymore. He pushed, saying, "Come on, it's just for 5 minutes." My sister chimed in, asking if everyone could see how unreasonable I was being. My mom suggested it would just be for a few minutes. I told her that this was exactly how we got into this mess the first time. Just for 5 minutes turned into 7 people using it constantly. My dad said I was making this into a bigger issue than it needed to be. I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and showed them my internet bill. I told them they wanted to know why this matters. I pay $80 a month for this service. I work from home, and when too many people are using it, I can't do video calls with clients. Last month, I almost lost a project because my connection kept dropping during a presentation. My sister said it wasn't like they were costing me extra money. I explained that they were. I had to upgrade to a higher plan because of all the usage, and I was considering getting a business line now, which costs even more. The room got quiet for a moment. Then my sister rolled her eyes and said whatever. She would just use the coffee shop internet for everything. I told her that worked for me. But she wasn't done. Over the next few days, she started telling extended family about our fight, painting me as a bad guy who won't help his own sister with internet access. She conveniently left out the part about giving my password to random people. The situation resolved itself in the most satisfying way possible. My cousin called me after talking to my sister. He said he heard my sister and I were fighting about internet. I told him yeah, it had been pretty frustrating, and explained the whole situation to him. He laughed and told me something interesting. He said that was funny because she had asked him for his streaming service password last week, and when he logged in yesterday, he saw someone had been watching shows he'd never heard of. When he asked her about it, she said the same thing, that she can't control what people do once she shares passwords. Turns out my sister had been doing this with multiple family members. She'd gotten passwords for streaming services, online shopping accounts, and even cloud storage from various relatives, then shared them with her boyfriend and his friends. My cousin had already changed all his passwords after noticing unauthorized purchases on his Amazon account. He called my parents and explained what had been happening. Suddenly, the family's perspective on my selfishness changed pretty quickly. My parents apologized for not taking my concerns seriously, and my sister got a lecture about respecting other people's property and accounts. Her boyfriend's friends had been torrenting copyrighted movies using my internet connection. If I hadn't changed the password when I did, I could have gotten in serious legal trouble. When my dad found that out, he thanked me for being responsible and protective of the family. My sister still hasn't apologized directly to me, but she did stop giving me dirty looks at dinner. And last week she asked if she could borrow $5 instead of asking for my internet password. Progress, I guess. I'm a single dad to my 10-year-old daughter. Her mom passed away 3 years ago from cancer, so it's just been the two of us ever since. My daughter is the light of my life. She's energetic, curious, and maybe a little clumsy sometimes, but what kid isn't? We've been working hard to build new traditions and make good memories together, which is why I was so excited about taking her to our town's annual summer festival. This festival is huge for our small community. They close down Main Street, set up carnival rides, food trucks, live music, the whole 9 yards. My daughter had been counting down the days for weeks. She'd saved up her allowance to play games and buy cotton candy, and I'd promised we could stay until the fireworks at the end of the night. We got there around 12 when it was just getting crowded. My daughter was practically bouncing with excitement, pointing at everything and asking if we could do this ride or try that game. We started with some of the smaller rides since the lines weren't too bad yet. She went on the spinning teacups 3 times in a row, laughing so hard each time that other parents were smiling just watching her. After rides, we grabbed lunch from one of the food trucks. My daughter wanted a funnel cake the size of her head, so of course that's what we got. She managed to get powdered sugar everywhere except in her mouth, which had me cracking up. We found a spot at one of the picnic tables they'd set up and just enjoyed watching all the people walk by. Around 3 o'clock, we decided to check out the game booths. You know the type: ring toss, basketball shooting, those milk bottle pyramid things that are definitely rigged. My daughter had her eye on this giant stuffed unicorn at the ring toss booth, so we headed over there. The area around the games was pretty packed. Families were weaving in and out between booths, kids were running around with prizes, and there was just that general festival chaos happening. My daughter was walking slightly ahead of me, focused entirely on that unicorn prize, when it happened. This woman was standing right in the main walkway, completely blocking traffic, while she argued with someone on her phone. My daughter, still looking up at the prize, accidentally bumped into her while trying to squeeze past. It wasn't a hard bump. My daughter weighs maybe 70 pounds, soaking wet. But this woman completely lost it. Karen started yelling about how my daughter needed to watch where she was going and called her a little brat. My daughter immediately started apologizing, looking confused and a little scared. I stepped forward to handle the situation. I told her it was just an accident and that my daughter hadn't seen her standing there. I tried to keep things calm and suggested there was no real harm done. But this woman wasn't having any of it. She was getting more worked up by the second. She screamed about how my daughter could have made her drop her expensive phone. Then she started going off about how parents like me let their kids run wild with no discipline. My daughter had moved closer to me and was tugging on my shirt. She was getting upset by the woman's yelling. Other people were starting to stare and I just wanted to defuse the situation and move on. I told the woman I understood she was frustrated, but reminded her that my daughter had already apologized. I asked if we could just leave it at that and move on. That's when this woman did something I never could have predicted. She looked down at my daughter, who was maybe 2 feet away from her, and slapped her across the face. Hard. The sound echoed even over the festival noise. My daughter stumbled backward and immediately started crying, not just from the physical pain, but from the shock and confusion of being hit by a stranger. I saw red. This woman had just assaulted my child over an accidental bump. Every protective instinct I had kicked in at once. I didn't even think. I pulled back and punched her square in the jaw with everything I had. The woman dropped like a sack of potatoes, hitting the ground hard. I could hear her making these weird groaning sounds, but honestly, I didn't care if I'd hurt her. I scooped up my crying daughter and we got out of there. She kept asking me why the lady hit her and if she was in trouble. I kept reassuring her that she did nothing wrong and that sometimes grown-ups make really bad choices. We ended up leaving the festival entirely. My daughter was too shaken up to enjoy anything else, and I was worried about what might happen if the police showed up. We went home, ordered pizza, and watched movies on the couch instead. She seemed to bounce back pretty quickly, but I was still furious. I kept expecting a knock on my door from the police. Our town isn't that big, and plenty of people saw what happened. I was sure someone would have gotten my license plate or recognized me, but days turned into weeks, and nothing happened. I did hear that the woman ended up in the emergency room with a broken jaw. Apparently, she needed surgery and her mouth was wired shut for 6 weeks. I met my husband some years ago. He wasn't married to his ex, but they had 2 kids together and things had gotten messy between them. She had developed a serious drug problem and chose that lifestyle over her family. My husband tried to make it work for the kids' sake, but eventually, he had to leave for everyone's safety. When he left her, she was broke and had nowhere to go. My husband could have just kicked her out of his house, but he let her stay there temporarily while we moved into his apartment together. We figured out a plan where we would live in his apartment for a while, then move back to his house when she got back on her feet. To make things easier for the kids, who stayed with us most of the time, we kept their bedroom set up at the apartment. I let my stepdaughter use my favorite body pillow that I'd had for years. It was expensive and helped me sleep better, but I wanted her to be comfortable. After a few months, we decided it was time to move back to the house. My husband had been paying her rent several months in advance to help her out, and she had found her own place. We offered to let her take over the lease on our apartment since she needed somewhere to live and we were moving out anyway. The day came when we were doing our final walkthrough of the apartment to make sure we hadn't forgotten anything. I was checking the kids' room one last time when I spotted my body pillow on the bed. Since we were moving and my stepdaughter would have her room back at the house, I decided to take my pillow with me. I was carrying it out to the car when Karen saw me. Her eyes went wide and she started walking over. She asked what I thought I was doing. I told her I was just grabbing my pillow and that we were all set to go. She accused me of stealing from her and said that the pillow wasn't mine. I laughed because I thought she was joking at first. I explained that this was my body pillow that I'd had for 3 years and that I had just let her daughter use it while we were here. Karen said she didn't care what I thought I owned before. She said everything in the apartment belonged to her now, and that I had no right to take anything. This woman was seriously trying to claim my personal belongings as her own property. I asked her if she was out of her mind and reminded her that this was my pillow that I bought with my own money. I explained that just because I let her daughter borrow it didn't make it hers. Karen argued that once I left it there, it became hers. She said that's how apartments work and that whatever was there when she took over was hers to keep. My husband heard the noise and came over to see what was happening. Karen immediately told him that I was trying to steal her pillow. My husband backed me up and told her that it was my pillow and that I'd had it since before we moved in together. Karen still insisted that she didn't care and that it was in her apartment now, so it belonged to her. This woman genuinely believed that because we were generous enough to let her take over our lease, she somehow inherited all of our personal belongings too. I told her she was insane and that this was my pillow and I was taking it. I kept walking toward the car, but she actually tried to grab it from me. She yelled at me to give it back and said I couldn't just take her things. My husband told her to back off and reminded her that we'd done enough for her already. He warned her not to push it. She was screaming about how we were thieves and she was going to call the police. I told her to go ahead because I'd love to explain to them how she was trying to steal my personal property. About a week later, we were settling into the house when Karen called my husband. She told him that she had left some of her perfumes in her daughter's room and that she needed them back. I could have played the same ridiculous game she did with my pillow. I could have told her that anything left in our house now belonged to us. But I'm not a petty, entitled person like she is. I told my husband to just bring her the perfumes because I didn't want to sink to her level. So my husband drove over and gave her the perfumes immediately, no questions asked. Because that's what normal, decent people do. About 2 months later, my husband got a call from Karen's landlord at her new place. The landlord explained that Karen had been lying about having a job and couldn't make rent. She was getting evicted and wanted to know if she could move back into what she called her apartment. My husband asked what apartment she meant, thinking she was talking about the one we gave her the lease to. The landlord then explained that Karen had never actually signed the lease transfer paperwork. She had been squatting there and was now 3 months behind on rent. Karen had been so entitled that she assumed she didn't need to actually handle the legal paperwork to take over our apartment. She just moved in and stopped paying rent, thinking the apartment was somehow automatically hers. The landlord had been trying to reach us for months about the unpaid rent since our names were still technically on the lease. My husband had to get a lawyer involved to prove we had moved out and tried to transfer the lease to her. In the end, Karen got evicted from the apartment she thought she owned, lost the house she had been staying in, and had to move back in with her mother. Meanwhile, we're living happily in our house with our kids, and yes, I still have my body pillow. She still tells people we stole from her and kicked her out on the streets. She conveniently leaves out the part where my husband paid her rent in advance, let her stay in his house for months, and offered her our apartment lease. Everything was peaceful at this duplex I lived in until about 3 months ago, when this new guy moved into the upstairs unit. He drives this obnoxiously loud pickup truck and plays music at all hours like he's the only person in the building. At first, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just getting settled and didn't realize the parking situation, but then it started happening regularly. I'd come home from work, tired and ready to relax, only to find his truck parked right in my driveway like he owned the place. The first time it happened, I knocked on his door to introduce myself properly and explain the parking arrangement. I told him I was his downstairs neighbor and explained that the driveway was designated for my unit according to the lease. He seemed surprised and claimed he had no idea. I offered to show him a copy of my lease so he could see the parking clause for himself. He looked it over and apologized, saying it wouldn't happen again and calling me bro in that overly casual way some people do. The very next week, there was his truck again, parked right in my spot. I figured maybe he forgot, so I gave him another gentle reminder. He apologized again and moved his truck, but then it happened again and again. Each time I confronted him, he'd act surprised and apologetic, but his behavior never changed. It was like he thought when he just kept doing it, I'd eventually give up and let him have my parking spot. The breaking point came last Tuesday. I had been working late on a particularly frustrating coding project, dealing with bugs that seemed to multiply every time I fixed one. It was one of those days where nothing goes right, and all you want is to get home and decompress. When I finally left the office, it was pouring rain. Not just a light drizzle, but one of those heavy downpours that soaks you completely in about 10 seconds. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home because my fridge was basically empty, and by the time I got to my building, I was carrying 3 heavy bags of groceries and getting drenched. And there it was, his stupid truck, parked right in my driveway like a big metal middle finger. I sat in my car for a moment, rain hammering on the roof, trying to decide whether to park on the street and get even more soaked, carrying my groceries, or to handle this once and for all. I chose option 2. I parked behind his truck, blocking him in, grabbed my groceries, and walked upstairs. I knocked on his door, probably a little harder than necessary. When he opened the door and casually asked what was up, I told him his truck was in my driveway again and that it was raining, I had groceries, and I really needed him to move it. His response was unbelievable. He said he was just going to be a few minutes and that it wasn't like I owned the driveway. I had to take a deep breath to keep from losing it completely. I reminded him that I did own it, or at least rented it, and that it was designated for my unit in the lease. We had been through this multiple times already, but he just brushed me off, telling me not to be so uptight about it because it was just a driveway. I tried to explain that I wasn't being uptight and that I was just asking him to respect the terms of our leases and stop parking in my spot. But he got defensive, saying he paid rent too and should be able to park wherever there was space. I told him that wasn't how rental agreements worked, and that this was my designated parking space. He just said whatever and told me he'd move it when he was ready. Then he started to close the door on me. I put my hand up to stop the door and told him no, he would move it now, I explained that I was blocking him in and wouldn't move my car until he moved his truck. He looked past me toward the driveway and saw that I wasn't bluffing. He asked when I was serious and said I couldn't just block him in. I told him to watch me and demanded he move his truck. He stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to figure out when I was going to follow through. I guess he decided I was because he finally grabbed his keys. Before heading downstairs, he told me I was being ridiculous and called me a total jerk about the whole thing. I pointed out that he was calling me a jerk when he had been parking in my spot for months after I had asked him repeatedly to stop. He stomped downstairs and moved his truck, but not before making a big show of slamming his door and revving his engine unnecessarily. The next day, I found a note on my car windshield. It was written in angry, messy handwriting, telling me to stop being such a control freak about the parking and saying there was plenty of space for both of us to share. I decided I was done playing nice. I took photos of the note as the lease close about parking and the property markers showing where my driveway boundaries were. Then I called my landlord. My landlord, thankfully, was completely on my side. She said she'd already gotten complaints about the upstairs tenants' loud music and general disregard for building rules. She told me she'd handle it immediately. The conversation she had with him must have been pretty direct, because the next day I got a text from an unknown number. The message said it was from my upstairs neighbor and that his landlord told him he had to apologize for the parking thing. Then he added a sarcastic, "So sorry, I guess," at the end. The passive-aggressive tone was incredible, but I didn't care. The important thing was that his truck stayed out of my driveway for about a week. Then last Saturday, I woke up to find his truck back in my spot. But this time there was also a bunch of trash scattered around my front door, empty beer cans, fast food wrappers, cigarette butts. It was clearly intentional. That was the final straw. I called my landlord again, and this time she was furious. Apparently, this wasn't the first complaint she'd received about this guy. The loud music, the parking, and now littering and harassment, it was adding up. She told me she was starting the eviction process and asked when I'd be willing to document everything for her records. I said absolutely. 2 days later, I came home to find a notice taped to his door. 30-day eviction notice for lease violations and tenant harassment. He must have seen me looking at it because his door flew open. He angrily asked when I was happy now and accused me of getting him kicked out over a stupid parking space. I told him that I didn't get him kicked out, his behavior got him kicked out. He blamed me for everything, saying it was all my fault and that I couldn't just share the driveway like a normal person. I explained that normal people respect lease agreements and don't harass their neighbors. He muttered whatever and said he hoped I was satisfied. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that I was satisfied. He just slammed his door. He moved out 2 weeks later, and the difference has been incredible. No more loud music at midnight, no more truck in my driveway, no more passive-aggressive notes or scattered trash. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.